بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الصعب إذا شئت سهلا. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. اللهم افتح لي ولأصدقائي يا رب العالمين. اللهم آمين. طيب. So today's lesson is very easy, and we already explained some of them, and we talked about some of them before. In the last class, we talked about the al-Quwa. We talked about the free will, and we talked about the action of the humans. And we talked about the judgment of the naturalism, and what does it called with the illah, and what does it called with the power that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put inside the humans. And this was a branched research from al-Wahdaniyah. We talked about al-Wahdaniyah, and we said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one in his action, one in his essence, one in his attributes, and one is in his actions. And then we said that no one do anything actually in the universe. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the doer of everything, and that what led us to the debate of the free will and the naturalism and so things. So originally we were talking about oneness, al-Wahdaniyah. And if you remember, the oneness was one of the 5 main negative attributes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala attributed with. We said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beginningless, and beginningless, and oneness, and uniqueness, and what does it mean, al-Baqa?
Eternal or endless?
Endlessness or eternal in the future, يعني al-Baqa. And yeah, so that's the 5, and the last one is oneness. And we proved those 5 attributes. Now al-Shaykh al-Imam al-Dardir is giving another proof, not another proof, is recapping the proof. Okay, so the recapping proof now he explains in the book it's called the overall proof, the overall argument. So what is the overall argument? He said, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so he's about to give an overall argument, a general argument of proving the negative attributes, which are oneness, beginninglessness, endlessness, or everlasting. Yeah, I remember now. Everlasting, oneness, and uniqueness. So what is the argument of this? So he says, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wasn't attributed by those 5 negative attributes, So that means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is emergent. How's that? He said, let's talk about al-qidam. Al-qidam, which is beginninglessness. Beginninglessness, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if was has a beginning, so that means he's emergent. So it's very clear. And the second is everlasting. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wasn't attributed by the everlasting, so that means he is not attributed with beginninglessness. How is that? Because the one that we approved that he is attributed with beginninglessness, has no beginning, it's a must and it's necessary that he has no end, that he is impossible to be annihilated, to be nothingness. Otherwise, if he has no beginning, and it is possible to be annihilated, that means this essence is contingent, and any contingent needs murajjih. I don't know what does it mean murajjih, but it's the doer. We explained this before. The doer that gives it the existence. Okay, and if the contingent, if this essence is contingent, that means it needs murajjih, and any essence needs murajjih, it's emergent, because it's like a balance. When someone make this balance go down, that's an accident, that's emergent, that is something popped up to the existence. It wasn't here, and then someone did like this, so it's now down. That is exactly what happened to any contingent. So that means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is impossible that he is attributed with other thing other than everlasting. So we talked about beginninglessness and everlasting. And then al-qiyamu bin nafs, independence. Al-qiyamu bin nafs, that means independence, that because if he wasn't independent, that means he is an accident, arad. What is an accident? Accident is like the color of this, the black color of this particle, of this body. So this black color is an accident in this essence, in this body. So the accident of, or the accident of the black color is depend on this body. So that's why we said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not an accident. It's not an attribute. So an attribute needs to be on or in the essence, okay? There's no smartness like this. We see someone is attributed with smartness. We say Liam is smart, Ahmed is smart, Ahmed is generous, Liam is generous, Sooner is intelligent. So any attribute or any accident is like attribute, which is arad or sifa, needs an essence to be inside. That what does it mean? He is independent. And we said that all the accidents, all the a'rad, all the accidents are emergent. It was in the nothingness, and then all of them happened. Okay? And then uniqueness. That is his unique. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is other than, it's nothing like the accidents, the emergence we see, whether these emergence are bodies or accidents. Because if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wasn't unique, that means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is alike, like these emergence, like these creations. And anything like any other thing, it takes its attributes. And one of the attributes of these existence here is the emergent. They are hawadith. We say hawadith in Arabic, emergence. So that means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is emergent, and we prove that that the necessary being is impossible to be emergent. And the last thing is oneness, because we proved that oneness in his essence, one in his essence, one in his attributes, and one in his actions. So if he is not one, that means that Allah is incapable of creating, incapable of give the existence what it needs to be existed. And the God, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as the idea, has to be a capable, absolute capable, absolute powerful. Okay? So that means if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wasn't attributed with those five negative attributes, and we mentioned why we say negative attributes before, it's not necessary to repeat that. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wasn't attributed, is not attributed with those five negative attributes, that means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is emergent. But we proved previously that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is impossible to be emergent. So that means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is impossible, that He's not attributed with those five attributes. And why is impossible that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be emergent? Because that will lead us to the circular the circular, the ad-dawr, the circular fallacy, and the infinite regress fallacy. And we said that the circular fallacy and the infinite regress is impossible, and what led us to the impossible is also impossible in previous stage. So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is impossible to be emergent. Now we're going to talk about, look, the book here, which is the explanation of Al-Imam al-Dardir and Hashiyat al-Sawi, the Imam al-Sawi, is different a little from the English book we are reading. So this part we will not find it in the English book, but we had to mention it because we are stuck to the Sharh al-Imam al-Dardir. Now, what I'm going to explain now, we're going to find it in the book of the English book, and it's very beautiful research. Okay. So those things, it's better to read it from the book, but Actually, the Imam al-Dardir is explaining the Arabic idioms and the Arabic attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like, what does it mean? Al-Jalil, Al-Jamil. What does it mean Al-Jalil? What does it mean Al-Jamil? Al-Wali, Al-Tahir, Al-Quddus, Al-Rabb, Al-Ali. Okay. So eventually all of these things, that means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is munazzah, transcendent of all of the uh, alike things. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no alike, has no similar in anything. Okay. So all of these Arabic terms or Arabic words that describes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, eventually it goes to the same meaning, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is higher in the position, higher and transcendent to all of these things. And when we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is transcendent, we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is transcendent of being connected or not connected or disconnected. Okay? It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not the bodies and the time and the lines. These things we can describe it by continuous and connected or not continuous or disconnected. For example, the lines, because it accepted to be described to these things. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He's unique, His essence and His attributes also, so we cannot describe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with one of these things. So we cannot say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is connected in His essence or murakkab, composite or compound or something. No. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not like this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one in His essence, one in His attributes, and one in His actions. And that's also led us to another thing. We cannot say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is connected to the world, the universe, or disconnected from it, or away from the, or outside or inside this universe. Because all of these things can be attributed for the things that are emergent. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not emergent. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beginningless, has no beginning. And we can find some people describe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of these things. Describe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is outside the universe and like has a gap, or like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is outside and sitting on a throne, and He is away from His creation. Astaghfirullah. And they took by the literally verse in the Quran. They take the ayat of Quran and the Prophet's sayings, Sunnah, al-Hadith. They take it literally. So they can describe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as in a directions, like above, down, on a right, on a left, behind, in the front, astaghfirullah. And some others, they describe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a jism, even if they don't say the word, even if they don't say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a 3D jism. And in English, what is jism Jism is anything that has 3 dimensions. That's jism, okay? Which is, you say in English also, a body. So they describe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is jism. And when we say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is jism, that means he is compound, murakkab. And anything that is murakkab, anything that is compound, is not is depend on and needs his parts, at least his parts. But the God needs nothing, okay? And what the essence that needs and anything, it's not a necessary being, it's contingent. So that means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is contingent, and any contingent is emergent, and that means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is emergent. Astaghfirullah. And some other there are some of scholars described Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the attributes, the emergent attributes. And we said that that all the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no beginning. It's a necessary being with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So because it was, if it was emergent, it means it's contingent, and any if it was emergent, it needs a doer, okay? And how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or how any essence create the attributes without the attributes of creating, which is the power and the knowledge and free will. We're going to talk about it in the next class, inshallah. So the reason why they attributed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the attributes of bodies, the attributes of accidents, of emergence, is because there are a lot of ayat in the Quran. When you take it literally, not metaphorically, when you take it literally, ala zahiriha, it led us to understand it like this way. And our scholars, as-Salaf wal-Khalaf, they solved this problem, the problem of understanding the ayat, the verses. They said you have 2 ways. First is tafweed, second is ta'wil. What is tafweed? Tafweed is when you hear that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is yadullahi fawqa aydihim. You say that when someone asks you, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a hand, you say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has nothing like us. And then you say, we approve what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala approved to himself. We just read the ayah and we don't know the meaning. We're going to delegate the meaning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. تفوض المعنى إلى الله. We are going to let the meaning to Allah to tell us the meaning يوم القيامة, because now we can't know. The language itself cannot help us to understand what does it mean. And if we took this literally, that will lead us to kufr, to disbelieving. For example, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كُلُّ شَيْءٍ هَالِكٌ إِلَّا وَجْهَهُ. So those who says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a hand, has a leg. Astaghfirullah. When we read this ayah, that means everything will vanish, will be annihilated, except for the face of Allah, of His face. That what does it mean, the ayah? كل شيء هالك إلا وجهه. That what does it mean? That literally, that's the literally ayah, the words. So if we understood it like this, that means the hand, the leg will be annihilated. Astaghfirullah. So they all the people the al-firqa that says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a hand and has a leg, they fell into a trap of ta'wil. They started to take it metaphorically. They said, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says كل شيء هالك إلا وجهه, it doesn't mean his face, it means his essence. Everything will be annihilated except Allah, all of astaghfirullah, yani his essence, all of the Allah, his hand, body, okay. So that's kind of ta'wil, that's kind of metaphorically taken metaphorically of the ayah. So our Salaf al-Salih, they were leave the meaning. They says, let's just read the ayah and leave the meaning to Allah. And we say that this path is هذا الطريق أسلم, like safe, safer for us. Safer from what? Because you don't know what does it mean actually. You're going to make ijtihad, you're going to spend an effort to know the meaning. Maybe eventually you will be wrong. But as Salaf, they said, okay, we don't want to do anything wrong, so we're going to let the meaning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, al-Khalaf, when we say as-Salaf, we means the first three generations of Sahaba and Tabi'een. Sahaba wa Tabi'een wa Tabi'i Tabi'een. So the companions and the followers of the companions and the followers of the followers of the companions. The first three generations. Those are the Salaf. And the Salaf, they delegated the meaning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then al-Khalaf, the followers of the followers of the followers of companions and so on, they said, okay, no, we need to interpret this. Because we have now Orientalists, we have those who entered Islam and reverted to Islam from other different background, different ideas, different ideologies and philosophies from India, from China, so we have to answer their questions and we have to be ready. So we're going to spend an effort, and these literally ayahs, we're not going to take it as it is. We're going to take away the corrupted meaning, which is the literally meaning, and then we're going to put another meaning from the language, and we're going to use another tools to understand the ayahs, like al-lugha, like the language, understanding the grammars, al-nahw, al-sarf, wal-balagha, wal-wad'. So we're going to try our best to understand the meaning. So now let's read this part from the book. Liam, can you start read? Share screen and start read. جزاكم الله خيرا.
Incorporeality, yeah?
Huh?
Is I'll share and just tell me if it's the right section.
Okay.
You can see?
Is it possible to make it larger?
Yeah.
No.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Incorporeality and immutability. What follows from what was discussed so far is Allah's incorporeality and immutability. That is to say, He is not a body with a shape and size, nor does He suffer from changes. He is not confined to a direction in space, nor altered by the passage of time. Rather, He transcends both. This is given the rational proof offered earlier, Burhan Huduth al-Ajsam, which categorically demonstrated the contingency and emergence of all bodies, as well as all things that change. Whereas Allah is necessary and beginningless by virtue of who He is. It is also given the many Quranic verses mentioned above, asserting Allah's uniqueness. After all, the world is filled with bodies, humans, animals, trees, mountains, clouds, etc. So if Allah were a body, then Allah would not be unique. In addition to all of the above, we will also mention the debate Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam had with his people. Allah makes mention of this in the Quran, in Al-An'am. وَإِذْ قَالَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ لِأَبِيهِ آزَرَ أَتَتَّخِذُ أَصْنَامًا آلِهَةً إِنِّي أَرَاكَ وَقَوْمَكَ فِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ. And when Ibrahim told his father Azar, "How can you take idols as objects of worship? Verily, I see that you and your people are in clear error." The discussion begins with Ibrahim alayhi salam confronting his father, alongside his community of idol worshippers. The religion of Ibrahim's community taught that those who managed the affairs of the world were actually the stars and planets in the sky. They constructed idols to represent the celestial bodies and worshipped those statues. فَلَمَّا جَنَّ عَلَيْهِ اللَّيْلُ رَأَى كَوْكَبًا قَالَ هَذَا رَبِّي فَلَمَّا أَفَلَ قَالَ لَا أُحِبُّ الْآفِلِينَ. So when it was nighttime, Ibrahim saw a planet. He told his people, "This is my Lord." But when the planet set, he said, "I do not worship those who move away." Pointing to one of the planets, Ibrahim alayhi salam asks the idolaters if that truly is the Lord of the heavens and earth. Isn't its being stationed high up in the sky proof of its superiority? But when the planet moved, Ibrahim concludes, it cannot be God, since it is impossible for the true Creator to suffer from change. فَلَمَّا رَأَى الْقَمَرَ بَازِغًا قَالَ هَذَا رَبِّي فَلَمَّا أَفَلَ قَالَ لَئِن لَّمْ يَهْدِنِي رَبِّي لَأَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الْقَوْمِ الضَّالِّينَ. So when Ibrahim saw the rising moon, he said to his people, "This is my Lord. But when it also set, he said, "If my Lord does not guide me, I will surely be amongst those gone astray." He, alayhi salam, then turns to the rising moon. Isn't motion in the upwards direction proof of majesty and nobility? But when the moon changed from a state of rising to a state of setting, Ibrahim concludes once again, this moon also cannot be God, despite its initial rising, because the true God does not change. فَلَمَّا رَأَى الشَّمْسَ بَازِغَةً قَالَ هَذَا رَبِّي هَذَا أَكْبَرُ فَلَمَّا أَفَلَتْ قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ إِنِّي بَرِيءٌ مِّمَّا تُشْرِكُونَ. So when Ibrahim saw the rising sun, he said to his people, "This is my Lord. It is even larger." But when it too set, he said, "O people, I am free from the gods you associate with the true Lord." He, alayhi salam, then notices the rising sun. Not only is this celestial body rising, But it is also much larger than the moon. Isn't its size evidence of its greatness and power? But when the sun also changed from rising to setting, Ibrahim immediately concludes, this sun also cannot be God, despite its size. From Prophet Ibrahim salam's argument, we know it matters not whether a body is high up in the sky, or if this body is moving in the upwards direction, or if it is of an incredibly large size. What matters is that the body accepts change, and by virtue of this acceptance of change, we can know that it cannot be the supreme creator, Lord of the heavens and earth. إني وجهت وجهي للذي فطر السماوات والأرض حنيفا وما أنا من المشركين. I have turned my face in worship to the one who created the heavens and earth, and I am not from amongst the idolaters. Stressing on Allah's incorporeality and immutability is important, given the modern spread of a group that calls to tajsim. Tajsim, from the word jism, meaning belief that Allah is a body. The believer in tajsim is called a mujassim or mujassima. In support of this creed, the mujassima offer two main arguments. Firstly, that their past scholars believed Allah to be a body, therefore Allah is a body. Secondly, obligating readers to accept the literal interpretation of the Quran and Sunnah, and then claiming that some of the passages therein indicate that Allah is a body. To the first argument we say, apart from the fact that most of the references you offer are fabrications of attributing heinous beliefs to righteous scholars, even if those who you reference were truly mujassima, this would not entail the truth of tajsim. Would you accept that Hinduism is true because Hindu scholars said so, or that Christianity is true because Christian scholars said so, or that Shi'ism is true because the scholars of the Shia said so? Clearly, theological disputes cannot be settled by simply citing someone who agrees with you, as the maxim commonly attributed to Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu ta'ala an says, إن الحق لا يعرف بالرجال ولكن الرجال هم الذين يعرفون بالحق. Truth is not known by men, but the men of truth are known by knowing the truth. Meaning, something is not true or false because someone you admire said so. Rather, one must first independently know the truth and then follow those who adhere to it. And how hypocritical is the mujassim who criticizes taqleed, one's adherence to scholarly opinion without knowing the evidence that supports those opinions himself, on jurisprudential issues of fiqh, by appealing to the fallibility of the scholars, when that same mujassim insists of the taqleed of those he likes when it comes to creedal matters. Furthermore, if you accept the statements of scholars as proof in matters of theology, then why not side with the majority of scholars throughout Islamic history? Scholars like Imam Abu Hanifa, who said in al-Fiqh al-Akbar, وَهُوَ الشَّيْء لا كالأشياء ومعنى الشيء الثابت بلا جسم ولا جوهر ولا عرض ولا حد له ولا ضد له ولا ند له ولا مثل له. And he is an existent unlike any other, meaning he exists without being a body or a particle or an accident. He exists without having a physical boundary or a rival or a partner or similitude to anything else. Scholars like Imam al-Tahawi, who said in al-Aqidah al-Tahawiyya, وَتَعَالَى عَنِ الْحُدُودِ وَالْغَايَاتِ وَالْأَرْكَانِ وَالْأَعْضَاءِ وَالْأَدَوَاتِ وتحويه الجهات الست
لا تحويه الجهات الست.
أستغفر الله. لا تحويه الجهات الست كسائر المبتدعات. And he is clear from having physical boundaries, extremities, or sides, from having body parts or limbs. He is not confined to any of the 6 directions, meaning up, down, front, back, left, right, like the created beings. Or like Imam al-Ghazali, who wrote, فإن خطر بباله أن الله جسم مركب من أعضاء فهو عابد صنم فإن كل جسم مخلوق وعبادة المخلوق كفر وعبادة الصنم كانت كفرا لأنه مخلوق وكان مخلوقا لأنه جسم فمن عبد جسما فهو كافر بإجماع الأئمة السلف منهم والخلف. So if any,
بإجماع الأمة السلف منهم والخلف. نعم.
so if anyone believed that Allah is a body composed of body parts, then this person is an idol worshipper. For every body is created, and the one who worships creation is a disbeliever. And idol worship is disbelief because the idol is created. And we know the idol is created because it is a body. So if anyone worshipped a body, then this person is a disbeliever by the consensus of all Muslims, both the Salaf, i.e. those of the first 3 generations, and the Khalaf, those of the later generations. As for their second argument concerning the literal interpretation of revelation, we respond, following absolute literalism would lead us into many contradictions. After all, a literal interpretation of the passages informing us of Allah's uniqueness entails His incorporeality, whereas interpreting some other passages of the Quran literally would entail His corporeality. Thus, interpreting the entire book literally entails a contradiction, Allah's being both a body and not a body. Therefore, one must interpret one of the 2 sets of passages metaphorically, so your claim to absolute literalism fails. So if the opponent asks, which passages should we interpret literally and which should we interpret metaphorically? The response, the Quran gives us the answer to this in Al-Imran. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم هو الذي أنزل عليك الكتاب منه آيات محكمات هن الكتاب وأخر متشابهات فأما الذين في قلوبهم زيغ فيتبعون ما تشابه منه ابتغاء الفتنة وابتغاء تأويله وما يعلم تأويله إلا الله والراسخون في العلم يقولون آمنا به كل من عند ربنا وما يذكر إلا أولو الألباب. It is He who sent the book down to you, mostly comprised of clear verses. They are the foundation of the book, and a few other verses which are ambiguous. As for those with a sickness in their hearts, they follow that which is ambiguous, seeking discord and seeking its interpretation, and no one knows its true interpretation except for Allah. As for the people of the book, as for the people of knowledge, they say, we believe in it. All of it is from our Lord, but no one remembers except those of intellect. Allah informs us that the Quran is comprised of clear verses, those that afford only one interpretation, and ambiguous verses, those that afford multiple interpretations. And those with sickness in their heart are the ones who follow the ambiguous verses to the exclusion of the rest. Entailing, the righteous believers are those who follow the clear verses and interpret the ambiguous in light of the clear, which is why the clear verses are called the foundations of the book. With the above in mind, we then turn to the passages informing us of Allah's uniqueness. Passages like لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ, nothing is like Allah's resemblance, or وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ, and there is nothing like unto him, or رب السماوات والأرض وما بينهما فاعبده واصطبر لعبادته هل تعلم له سميا, the Lord of the heavens and earth and all that which exists between them, so worship him and be patient in your worship. Do you know of any like him? And we find that they are clear and straightforward, passages whose Arabic only affords a single interpretation, namely that Allah is unique and unlike anything in creation. However, When we turn to the passages which the Mujassima insist must be interpreted literally, we find that they are ambiguous passages whose Arabic affords many interpretations. Passages like Ar-Rahmanu ala al-Arsh istawa, the overly merciful on al-Arsh istawa, which the Mujassima claim means Allah, the overly merciful, sits istawa on the throne al-Arsh, but affords other interpretations like Allah, the overly merciful, subjugates istawa, his dominion al-Arsh. In the same way, the king ascended the throne in English can signify the king's taking over the kingdom, even if there wasn't a physical chair that the king literally sat on. From the above, we come to know that the clear passages are those which proclaim Allah's uniqueness, whereas the ambiguous ones are those which the Mujassima insist we must interpret literally, and what is ambiguous must be interpreted in light of the clear, as we saw in Al-Imran, not the other way round. Thus the Mujassim's appeal to revelation in support of his beliefs is fallacious, since the Mujassim isn't actually appealing to revelation, he is appealing to his misinterpretations of the revelation. So Allah is free from subsistence or confinement to a direction, or from being physically connected to or disconnected from another, since all of this entails corporeality and mutability, whereas Allah is incorporeal and immutable. He exists without a place, without confinement to any direction, and without alteration with the passage of time. وتفويض أيضا. Okay.
Yes.
Tafwid and ta'wil. We have shown that categorical rational proofs and unequivocal verses of the Quran all demonstrate Allah's incorporeality. However, there also exist ambiguous texts whose literal interpretation suggests that Allah is corporeal. The scholars of Ahl Sunnah determine two ways to deal with those ambiguous texts. First, tafwid, meaning consigning the true meaning of the ambiguous passage to Allah, while negating the literal meaning which entails any imperfections for him. So when someone asks for the interpretation of an ambiguous text, you say, I don't know how to interpret this text, but I know that the literal interpretation is not the correct one. This is in keeping with verse 7 of Al-Imran, which informs us that only Allah knows the meanings of the ambiguous verses. Tafwid is the safest path for lay Muslims, those unfamiliar with the Arabic language, or with the tafasir, Quranic commentaries of the scholars. After all, Muslims are not obligated to know the meanings of everything in the Quran, especially when Allah himself told us that only He knows the meanings of those few ambiguous texts. As such, there is no blame in simply saying, I don't know. Tafwid is also the method favored by many early scholars, the Salaf, who recommended it to avoid speaking about Allah without knowledge. The second method in dealing with ambiguous texts is ta'wil, meaning assigning a possible metaphorical interpretation to the ambiguous texts. This metaphorical interpretation must be congruent with the decisive rational and scriptural proofs, as well as with the rules of the Arabic language, and you affirm the metaphorical interpretation as only a possibility, because Allah already told you that only He knows the correct interpretation for certain. For example, interpreting Taha verse 5, the verse about al-Arsh, to possibly refer to Allah's control over all His creation, as shown in the example above. This is the method favored by many later scholars, the Khalaf, who recommended it for the purposes of defending true Islamic creed from its detractors.
Barakallahu feek wa jazakallahu khairan. This is for today, inshallah. Next time, we're going to start the attributes of meaning, بإذن الله تعالى. Okay? جزاكم الله خيرا وبارك الله.